welcome to this next edition of the Value Exchange podcast. I'm Annabelle Lambert and I'm here with my usual co-host Rob Pye. Say hello, Rob Pye.
Hi there, both.
We are delighted today to be joined by Lady Val Corbett, who we've met only recently. But I think there's two things I would say about Lady Val. One is about prison reform, and one is about empowering women. So I'm going, without further ado, I'm just going to ask Lady Val to tell us about her story, who she is, where she's from, what she's about. So, Lady Val.
Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to do this. I mean, what could be better talking about yourself all the time? Right, my story starts in Cape Town, South Africa, where I was born. I had a very unhappy childhood because my father was a physical abuser. And it was something that has stayed with me all my life. And I believe that adversity gives you strength. And I've had to have strength quite a lot of times in my life, because on the surface, it looks as if, the good fairy has tapped my shoulder at birth, but it wasn't like that at all. I left Cape Town to become a journalist in Fleet Street because when I was 12, somebody said to me, "You ask an awful lot of questions. Why don't you become a journalist?" And I said, "Do you mean you get money for asking questions?" She said, "Yes." I said, "I'm going to be a journalist." And from then on, I had this absolute trajectory. That is what I wanted to do. And of course, Fleet Street was at that time the mecca of journalism. So that's where I wanted to be. And I did 3 jobs to get there. Partly, of course, well, quite wholly, really, to escape my life at home. My mother did say she was going to leave her husband, and I then said we were going to then set up a home and do all these things. I was going to work there. And then he bought her a house that she really liked, and she said, "I think it's all going to be different." And of course it wasn't. So I did these 3 jobs, my own job, and then I also did some waitressing at the weekend. And I realized amazing things about restaurants. I once had a woman who said, there's cucumber on my plate." I said, "Well, it's a salad." She said, "I can't have cucumber. And what's more, I cannot have any food that a cucumber has even touched. I bloat up." She said, So I said, I went back to the chef. I said, "You have to take that away and you have to." And he said, yeah. And he just rearranged the plate. I took it off and she said, "Oh, thank you so much. I'll give you a very large tip." And she did. So I had a lot of experience on that end as well. Anyway, I came to Fleet Street, and then I had a real problem because at that time, the National Union of Journalists were very, very powerful. And I couldn't get a job because I wasn't a member. And I wasn't a member because I didn't have a job. So I went traveling and I came back without any money. And so I had to live on hard-boiled eggs. It was a long time before I even sampled a hard-boiled egg. But eventually I met a man called Alan Johnson who was doing a magazine, free magazine for women, which was distributed to customers of the Spar grocery chain. And he offered me the job. And I said, "I'm not a member of the NUJ." She said, "Don't worry about that. You'll get the job and then you'll get a membership," which is exactly what happened. And so at a stroke, I was an editor of a magazine, and we had no staff, of course. So I was the whole staff. I had a secretary, thank goodness. But apart from that, I was Jan Kennedy, the beauty editor, Anne Graham, the fashion editor. I was Green Fingers, having not been near a plot of land. But I was very, very pleased with my name for the Agony Aunt, which is Patience Strong. I thought it was a really good name. And in the beginning, of course, I would have to write the problem and then answer it as well. And that led to the magazine, which was actually quite popular. In fact, because I don't knit or sew, I pictured a photograph of a knitting pattern of I think, yes, it was a polar neck, but the actual pattern had nothing to do with the photograph. And we got loads of letters, and the boss said to me, "What's happening here?" I said, "It shows that the magazine is so popular, so well read, that a lot of people are complaining." I don't know how I got away with that. Anyway, so then the magazine was taken over by a company in Fleet Street, and I was at last in Fleet Street. And it was called Good Life, and the first we launched with a big flourish. It came out very well. It did well. Second issue came out, terrific. And then the printers went on strike, and they went on strike for quite a long time. I can't remember just how long. And they said, I'm very sorry, we haven't got the money to do another launch. So the magazine folded. So then I was made redundant, and that was another big rock. But eventually, a friend of mine who was on The Sun phoned me up and said, listen, we're just starting. I said, oh, Rupert Murdoch. She said, look, it's going to be fun. So, and it was fun. I did a consumer column, which was very well read because all the taxi drivers never knew about it because all they saw was page 3 and the sport. But I did a lot of I did a lot of good consumer stories, based on a popular trend. For instance, on mattresses, we did the bounce per ounce test and things like that. So before I got onto the SPA, the Women's Chronicle, which was then called, um, I was on a magazine, a trade magazine called Furnishing World, and I bought a new dress, and in the shop it looked really lovely. But in the day that I was going to start my first day, I thought this was a great mistake. And so the woman who was inducting me, we were going through to the canteen, and I said, "Does this dress make me look dumpy?" And a voice said, "Yes, it does." And that was Robin Corbett, and he was 6'3", and I'm 5'2". So I looked up and I thought, what a very rude man. And of course, he called me Dumpy for ages afterwards. But we got together, and so uh, we got married, and we had a very nice life because he was a journalist as well. He was deputy editor at that time of the Farmers Weekly, and we went to Fleet Street every day. Blah blah blah. And then I got pregnant, and he decided to stand for Parliament. He was very politically active anyway. Uh, and I thought, I don't know about politics. The only time I ever voted, I became a British citizen because it was so difficult to travel with a South African passport, which is about now with Brexit. It's very difficult to travel with a British passport. But anyway, at the time, and uh, my I did vote in an election, and it was the time they didn't have at that stage any names of the actual parties, which is strange, I know. But I wanted to vote Liberal, and so I voted for Major Wilmot Seal, whom I thought was a very liberal sounding name. He turned out to be the fascist. And he got 42 votes, of which mine was one. And Robin has never let me forget that. You voted fascist. Anyway, so when my daughter Polly was born, our daughter Polly was born, I decided that I'd go freelance because I didn't want to be away from her. And so I became a columnist on Cosmopolitan. I did a lot of amazing stories on many magazines and newspapers. And then what happened then? Oh, yes. I became a director, volunteer director, because no money. Robin always said no Corbett's ever get money for jobs. And I became a director for a training restaurant called the Hoxton Apprentice in Hoxton Square. And what they did was they trained people below the radar, people who are NEET, no education, employment or training, and no parental support as well. And I learned such a lot there. First of all, I learned that people can change. And that stood me really good in good stead when I went into the prison reform sector. Because I witnessed miracles, people who had never worked, people who were socially inept, people who had never written, they never ate with a knife and fork because they were only eating burgers and pizzas. People who didn't have a family life that sat around a table anyway. Um, they learned how to have social skills. They learned jobs. They learned reliability. They learned that if I don't turn up, somebody else is going to have to do my job as well as theirs. They learned team building, and in 6 months they turned around and became socially functioning employees. Um, I was really struck with one particular case. A woman, she was so nervous. She walked around Hoxton Square 3 times before she came in, and she said to the coach, "I don't know why I'm here. I have 4 children. Okay, they're off my hands now, but I haven't worked. I don't think I'll be any good in this. I'm in a restaurant. I've never even been in a restaurant." So the coach said, "Well, if you had 4 children, you must have been some kind of organization." And she said, "Well, yes, I had to do this and that." She said, "Well, that could be quite useful here." Within 6 months, that woman was head waiter. And so the change that I saw was really, really special. And it stayed with me for a long time. So then Robin was in Parliament, and he was there for 34 years. And I then became chair of Women's Aid in this area, a working chair on call once a week and every sixth weekend. And I was there for about 25 years. And again, I saw women who had been unempowered. I saw women who had been ground down, being told that they were useless, that they were nothing. I saw women who said to me, "I'm going back because we're going to have another baby and we're going to move house and I know it's going to change." And of course, relevant of my mother, we couldn't say it won't change. It won't change. We have to say, well, this is what you want to do. Fine. Do come back if it doesn't work. Oh, no, I'm sure it's going to work. And of course, they did come back sometimes. So again, I realized that women at that time, and we still haven't made as many strides as we should even now. And then I got onto gender equality, which I think is illogical. And so I started at the Hoxton Apprentice, I started the Hoxton Apprentice Professional Women's Network because I had wanted people to come into the restaurant. And it was very successful. And especially since I used to bring the whole of the kitchen staff in, and the food, of course, was brilliant. To meet the people, to meet the women, and Leon, the 6'5", gorgeous head chef, told his story that he'd been in prison for 18 months, and this was the chance that he needed. He would never ever go back, and so on. Everybody cried, me too, and you know. That was again another aspect that I took with me. So then we come to Robin. Robin was a very assiduous MP, and he phoned me one day in his first. I think he'd been in Parliament about 3 or 4 years. Then he phoned up. He said, "I'm very excited." He said, "I've drawn number 2 in the private members ballot," and I thought, "Oh, lovely." I said, "Lovely." Put the phone down. I thought, "Ugh," because private members bills rarely get into law. But Robin, and I think through my Women's Aid experience, because I used to talk to him about the women I met there, especially one woman who was raped by her husband and had no recourse to law because at that time, rape within marriage wasn't a criminal offence. So he decided that his private members' law would be lifetime anonymity for people in the court, for women in the courts and in the media. And it was a very full Friday attendance, which is not normal in the House of Commons on a Friday because they're all in their constituencies. And there was one person on the on the opposite bench who was very against the law. And he started filibustering. But unfortunately for him, he had to answer a very urgent call of nature. And he rushed out of the chamber. And as soon as he was out, the speaker said, "Right, we'll have a vote," and it was passed unanimously, and it's still in place today, as you know. So the biggest rock in my life was after about 35 years of a marriage that was, on the whole, very, very good because we were soulmates, and he was my best friend and mentor as well, political mentor. He developed lung cancer and died. And when somebody dies, you get lots of cups of tea and lots of sympathy, and you're also very, very busy because you're all these things you have to do at the funeral and so on. And But a few weeks later, or a few months later, actually, people think, well, now you've got to manage, and you do, and you have. But that's when reality strikes. And so that was the time I was really miserable. I was sitting looking at television, flicking through things, finding something that would distract me. And then I came onto this Ryder Cup of golf. And now I don't play golf. I have absolutely no interest in golf. I think it's quite a boring game. But anyway, millions do not agree with me there. Anyway, but it was a competition, a contest between America and Europe, and the Europeans won, which I was pleased about. But then the winning captain dedicated the win to his friend Sebi Ballesteros, who had recently died. And he said the words that absolutely catapulted me into my chair like that. He said, all men die, but some men live on. And I thought, that's what I need to do. I need to make Robin's legacy live on. I need to make people realize what he absolutely was doing in 34 years of Parliament, 20 years an MP, and the rest in the House of Lords. So I thought, what should I do? And I was thinking about rape, but then I thought about Robin's chairmanship of the All-Party Penal Affairs Group. Um, he was there for 10 years until he died. And when he got the job, I mean, obviously unpaid, his colleagues said, don't do this. Don't do this. Prison is a poison chalice. It's very unpopular, and you'll lose votes, and also you might affect your career. Well, he took no notice of that. And I thought it was that stubbornness. I thought that's where the area that I need to go in. And so what I did was I went to the then director of the Prison Reform Trust, which Robin worked in quite closely, Juliet Lyons, and together we organised an annual award for three charities or non-profits who do the most to support people from prison. It was called the Robin Corbett Award for Prison Reintegration. And actually, we had our 10th anniversary presentation this June in the House at the House of Lords, and three winners duly shared £10,000 from a sponsor. But then I met so many people in the prison reform sector who were working in their own little pond. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be better to work in a sea so we could crusade and do more things? And that was the start in 2017 of the Corbett Network for Prison Reintegration. I think I better stop there so that you can, people say, for me,
No,
you have
I'm
to,
just,
yeah,
I'm
you have to,
spellbound. Really, I just feel I'm in the middle of a story that probably. So there is this. It's a rather modern concept that Annabelle came across called squiggly careers. Squiggly
yeah.
careers
Mhm.
that are not, they're not sort of you join a factory when you're a boy and then retire when you're 65 and that's it. You've had
No,
a very squiggly career that is
very
very um, it's very modern. It's actually a very modern concept of I do that squiggly careers. But I love the fact that you've never forgiven him for calling you dumpy, and that
no.
I think there was reciprocation there. It's just absolutely brilliant. So I kind of Annabelle, do you have anything off the sort of the ledger of
No, but just
questions that
just
you've
uh,
been
just
building?
just interestingly remembered. We had another gentleman who's working on sort of inspiring very young children into what they might do. His particular focus was space, but careers that are future careers. Things that we really
Mm,
need to get into. But he had a moment with. I don't actually think it was a returning citizen, but it was somebody who was on the edge of the justice system, who didn't fit in a school, but found his meaning in a kitchen, in a restaurant as a chef, because he was people valued him, and he felt much more self-worth than just being in that team environment and being given the
mm.
opportunity. And I was just reminded of that with your story with the Hoxton training restaurant. So
Yeah,
it's a lot
yeah.
to be said for
Yeah.
that kitchen team environment, and everybody having a role to do, and
Mm.
feeling, every bit is valued, even the person when it's cooking, particularly even the person who puts the garnish on the top. It all matters. It all matters. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
all.
and
Well, thank.
I mean, I haven't. Sorry, Annabelle.
No,
Val.
I'm done.
Sorry. Any?
No,
Okay.
I was just going to say I haven't talked about the my women's network actually,
Yeah, and
because
that was my question. That
oh,
because
good.
in hearing you speak,
Yeah.
and also here we do a lot of work with the police, and some of the abuse at home stories which have
Yeah.
gone through the ceiling during COVID,
I
during
know.
lockdown. We did a project in Reading called Joining the Dots, which was about helping a number of projects, rather like the fund that we're working on at the moment is early stage of that. But one of them won a lot of
Mm.
prizes about
Mm.
sheltered accommodation for women on
Yeah.
the edge of the criminal
Yeah.
justice system, but needed to get out of the house into a
Yeah.
safe place.
That's right.
And it was an absolutely incredible story. So my next question was going to be, what about women? So thank you for thinking the
Good.
same.
Yes, I suddenly realized. Okay, after the in the 2010, the Conservative government came in and decided to stop our funding because they didn't want small patches of people like us. They wanted a huge conglomerate, which they gave billions to, which was of course not as effective. But I won't go there. But anyway, this is why we'll never accept government funding because they can just take it away at a stroke. Anyway, the restaurant had to close, and the women absolutely begged me to continue with the Professional Women's Network. So I've now called it the Lady Val's Professional Women's Network, and we went to Brown's in Covent Garden. And I've just celebrated my 15th anniversary lunch, which was absolutely spectacular. The reason that I think it's lasted such a long time is because of our motto, which I pinched from Madeleine Albright, a past Secretary of State in America. And she said, there's a special place in hell for any woman who doesn't help another woman. And one of my networkers said to me, I've changed it. I've said there's a special place in heaven for any woman who helps another woman. I thought about it for a minute. I thought, nah, hell works better for me. um, so the people who come, I say, care and share. My icebreaker, when they come in, I grab them and introduce them to other women, and they have to start with the icebreaker sentence, which is, how can I help you and how can you help me? And it has caused, I mean, it does what it says on the tin. It really, really resonates. And so much has come out of it. People have formed businesses together. But apart from that, a lot of friendships. And I say we care and share. We advise, we help. And that comes out very much in the feedback afterwards, how many women they met, of diverse, and this is another thing, it's not only for people in finance or journalism or television, it's for anybody. And so you could be sitting next to an artist or an investment banker. It's only for senior business women, senior partners, business owners and entrepreneurs. It works very well because we are passionate about gender equality. We just do not understand why women doing the same job as men are paid less. Um, the other thing is that I believe that there was never a glass ceiling. I think women just lack the confidence to smash it. And I regard myself not as a feminist, but as an equalist, because it's only when we can become equal with men. I don't say that we're better than men or worse than men. I say we're different to men. We are more collegiate. We listen more. There was a conference that I remember hearing about, and men were asked how much of the time at the conference did women speak, and they all said 75%. In reality, it was 25%. And so there's a huge disparity between what men think and what women think. But together, if they work together, I think that could be absolutely incredible. And it's now statistically proved that a woman on a board improves the company. So why aren't there more women on the board? Well, as a South African born, I have to tell you, I think it's the old boys club. I really do. I think that people come out of these public schools and they have old Harry there who's running a company. Oh, Harry, can you do? Maybe I'm wrong, but honestly, there's no reason why there are fewer women on the board than men. There are more men called Dave and Peter than there are Michelles. The fact is that if a woman complains, I know somebody who complained. She was working in the city, and she says, and she told me, she said that at bonus time, when a man goes in, he says, "I've done this and this and this, and so I should get that." Uh, and a woman goes in and says, "What is my bonus?" So already she's a supplicant. So this woman realized when she went out that the man sitting in the desk next to her, who had done exactly the same job, was getting more money or more bonus. And so she complained. And of course, it ruined her career. She didn't go to a tribunal, but she couldn't get another job in police city because apparently, I don't know the city, but apparently, it's a very small world. So it's that kind of thing that, and women trying to get finance for startups, very difficult. And if you're a black woman, even worse. So we've got this diversity problem. We've got this old boys problem, which I insist still exists. I remember a woman, a chief executive of a recruitment company, and she said to me, "Oh, Val, she said, you're pushing at an open door." She spoke like this. She's open an open door. All companies want more women there. I said, "Really?" I said, that's very lovely to hear. I'm not sure that. Oh, yes, it's absolutely true." She said, "Just the other day, this chief executive phoned me up and said, 'Fiona,' she said, 'I want you to find me a woman on the board. I want you to find somebody who can mesh with the boys here.'" And I looked at her and I thought, does she hear herself talking in this patronizing way that this man did? Anyway, we are not where we want to be, and we are not going to get there without more pushing, which of course means that if a man pushes, he's bullish. If a woman pushes, ugh, this is not good. She's a bitch. And there are two types, by the way, of women leaders. You're either a devil or an angel, and there are some devil women who. Who are devils. I'm not saying they're all wonderful, but we need more of a bite of the cherry. Now, let me
Yeah,
see.
and I think you've characterised the problem beautifully. Um, speaking as a male,
Oh,
I
thank
can
you.
empathise with all of it. But then, on the women going into the annual assessment, there was actually a study on that. It was a scientific study that proved that exactly as you say, that women going into their appraisals, asked for very different things, and
Absolutely.
and again, it's not necessarily the overt bias, but a culture that is, well, we've got a hidden system that people that push and ask, go up the. So it's quite. We found this with this new thing called ESG, environmental, social, and governance reporting that
Hmm.
businesses have to do. It's the new thing from CSR, the corporate social responsibility. That
Yeah.
although there may be the will or messages or desire or intent to behave in a sustainably way and build a better world, if you have got a company, whether that's the East India Trading Company or Shell,
Mm.
um, with a history, and you haven't designed this from the start, then good luck with changing the hidden culture. And the
Absolutely.
hidden
Absolutely.
culture is what has the biases, which I think you shared a beautiful story about, fitting in with the boys on the board or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Meshing, and I hate that word meshing. Yeah. But sometimes it does work in your favor. And I'll tell you a funny story. I went for an interview with the Sunday Express, and I didn't realize. I found out later that the editor was a legs man, and if you had good legs, you were in. Now, I have very good legs, but only from the knees down. And those are the ones on show. So I got the job. And I went into the newsroom, and there was this big, bullish man called Arthur Brennard. He's I hope he doesn't hear this. I think he must be dead. Um, and he hated me on sight. I mean, it wasn't anything to do with me, but he had the succession of women, young women with good legs, who were inexperienced, and who couldn't do the job. And he gave me two jobs, which the one was a day before Christmas. It's Christmas Eve, and it was about 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had to phone the head postmaster at Bristol Post Office to say why wasn't a stamp machine in one of the post offices not working. And I got through to the man's PA, and she started laughing. And she said, "You are joking, aren't you?" So, of course, I didn't get the quote. And Arthur said, "Typical, typical." And then I had to phone up a woman whose husband was having an alleged affair with the verger's wife or something like that. And she started crying. And I started crying. And so I couldn't ask her the question. I went to Arthur. I said, "She's very upset. I couldn't get the quote." She said, "Of course you didn't get the quote." So I didn't last very long there because I wasn't experienced enough. And it was a short-term contract anyway. I wasn't supposed to be there forever. But I've had some very funny things happen to me. So I've sometimes asked, what would you say to yourself at 18? It's a tough question, actually, because when I was 18, first of all, I thought I was like a Michelin woman. And I thought also that I wasn't very good looking. And I also had absolutely very little confidence in my looks. So my personality had to come out because I wanted to take away from that. So if I was 18 now, I'd say to myself, because just recently I saw some photographs of myself. I was damn gorgeous, and I was thin. I wasn't a Michelin person, um, and
Not at all dumpy. Not at all
not
dumpy.
dumpy,
No.
not at all dumpy. That dress, by the way, went into went to a charity shop the day after. Anyway, and I would say to myself, I would say to any young woman and young man listening to this is, you're special. You Nobody, and this is the thing that people don't realize. Nobody looks at you really. They may look at you and think, "Oh, not bad," or "Oh, don't like the outfit," or something. But then they forget. Nobody looks at shoes. Only women look at shoes. Men never see shoes. So whatever your shoes are, forget your shoes.
I
Forget what
find
you.
I find Grenadier Guardsmen are the exception to that. They do look down at your shoes,
Oh, right.
and if they're not
See
bulls,
how
then they move
dirty
on.
Well, then
There's
I
a
would
very
say.
small proportion of the
Then I
population.
was. Then I would give this bit of advice: do not go near Grenadier Guards with your shoes. But you need to have confidence in yourself. You are special. You are great, and don't. If you look in the mirror and you go, which is what I still do today, um, don't worry about it. Don't worry about what you look like in that. Just be yourself and do what you want to do. Um, I mean, the world is full of people who act. I think men do act better than women. Men do act that they can do things. I remember once we were cycling in Holland because it's very flat, and Robin was in front. He used to be a champion cyclist anyway, but his shirt was flapping out, and he was going. And I thought, my God, he's come to this place. He knows exactly where he's going. He had no idea where he was going, but he looked as if he knew where he was going. And I always remember that because men have that huge facility, whereas a woman would be far more humble, I suppose. We would say, "Look, I don't understand this," or something like that, thinking it would be nice for people to give you advice. And this is nice for people to give you advice, but then they think, "Well, I'm better than her." And he's not, by the way, not always, not always. I keep on saying that if the genders could actually appreciate the difference between the two, that women are more collegiate, we listen more, and we like team building, and men have a very clear strategy of where they need to go. And if you could, get these things together, I mean, it's unbeatable. But so often they seem to be in at war with one another. And I mean, I get so many women coming to me and saying it's so lovely to be in a room only with women, because I'm in a male orientated environment, and I have to be so careful about what I do and what I say. You don't want to be too forward. So I hang back a lot. And she said, I'm trying to get over it, and what we're doing in this room is giving me confidence to try to empower me, because that's what we need. We need empowerment, but not too not too much, because again, our voices, women's voices, and we had a excellent a man talking to. We have a speaker at our lunches, and he was talking about the timbre of a woman's voice, because some women, when they get excited, their voices rise like, "Ooh," like that. I'll never forget one woman in Parliament. I felt so sorry for her, because she had a particularly high pitched voice, and when she felt passionate about something, that voice went many, many octaves higher. And people used to laugh at her at all sides of the house. She never stood for re-election. I don't blame her. But men's voices, again, I find some men's voices are very, very loud. I mean, when you go into a restaurant and they're a group of men, you're aware that they're there. And the same with a lot of women. Again, the twittering sounds of women. So you need you need also to look at your voice. I'm going to now talk very dark, very deep, so that you think my voice is very low. But this is another way in which men say that women are talking more than they actually are.
Wonderful. Well, the joy, Val, of interviewing you is, I don't have to ask many questions because it flows. It flows. So we've done women, and I now, unless Annabelle's got anything burning, want to move on to the criminal justice
Yes, of
system,
course.
and
Yeah.
and we've had a bit of a why you sort of why you entered it, and so let's talk about the how. How have you engaged? Right, if you take us back to the start of the story, I guess post Robin and sort of
Oh
that,
yes. Oh yes.
talking
Everything is
that. So
post Robin.
so
Yeah.
post Robin, and how you engaged, and what actions you took. How did you put it into action?
Right. It was difficult. And now I have to say that we are regarded as one of the foremost people that the MOJ talk to, and I'm involved with the criminal, the Centre for Social Justice, the Prison Reform Trust, of course, Clinks, Criminal Justice Alliance, and so on. It's a band of organisations on that level who try very, very hard to try to help this broken system that we have. We have the highest reoffending rates in Western Europe. For young men, within 2 years, over 50% reoffend. Now, that figure falls to 19% when they have a job. So this is why my members concentrate on jobs a lot, because it's one way in which they could turn away from criminality. And anyone you turn away from criminality is making this country safer and also reducing the reoffending rate. But we also lock up far more people than Western Europe. Countries like Holland are closing prisons. We're building more big warehouses where you put in as many prisons as people as you can, because especially in private, well, particularly in private prisons, unless they have 90% rate of people in there, they're not making any money. So we have a system which has not changed. We have a system where there are still people, even today, being 23 hours a day in a cell. We have people today who are not supposed to be in prison because they have problems. They have problems like addiction, trauma, mental health. Their crimes are non-violent crimes. I think only 6% of people in prison have got violent or are violent. We have a system called the imprisonment for public protection, which is the UN has said it's a form of torture, and it's for people who have indeterminate sentences without end. There's a poor man, and he's only one of many. They've had 87 suicides, and there are masses of terrible, terrible problems if they ever released, because they have these mental health and trauma problems. There's one man, he was sentenced to 18 months for stealing a mobile phone, and he's still there for over 12 years later. Lots of people are like that. For some reason, we have asked and crusaded for resentencing, and the current Secretary of State for Justice, just refuses to consider it, and we don't know why. We've had 9, or is it 10, ministers of justice in the last 10 years. So there's a lack of consistency as well, which doesn't help. Somebody who has been very good, I won't mention his name, in the MOJ, really, really good at his job. In this latest reshuffle, he's gone to education, and the education minister has taken his place. So why? Because she doesn't know anything about prisons, and he does. I don't understand the logic. So those are the things that we are fighting. How I started was really trying to networking, and I found out from my women's networking that networking is absolutely the key. And so I set out to meet the movers and shakers in the prison reform sector, and I did. And I got advice from them on how to do it. I'm not at all shy of asking for help. And I think that's a really good thing to do. Ask questions and ask for help. If we go to parties, I mean, Robin and I used to go to parties. And when we came home, I used to say to him, how many? And he used to say naught. And how many of you? Naught. And this means that we went to dues, receptions and parties and things, and asked tons and tons of questions, and nobody ever asked us questions back. So my advice to anybody who's an introvert or shy, just ask questions. People love
Wow.
it. Love asking.
And that was your how many questions back, was it? The
That's
naught.
right.
Is
The
it? Wow.
North. Yep, absolutely. We once went to. I was doing television at the time. I forgot to tell you about that for the BBC. And Robin was in Parliament, and we were talking to this man. We found out everything about him. I virtually found out his sleeping patterns. I mean, everything, everything. And he didn't ask us one question. He didn't ask us. If he'd asked me, I would have said, I'm doing television for BBC, BBC One. And Robin would have said, and I'm a member of Parliament. He didn't say, he has no idea. But the next day, he apparently played golf. Oh, golf again, with our host. And he said what a wonderful time he had with us. And of course he did. He did have a fabulous time because we concentrated on him completely. So my advice, as I say, to the shy and the introvert, just please ask questions. You'll be so popular. So building the Corbett network, because this is the non-profit social enterprise, although we're turning into a community interest company quite soon. We are we needed to build up our I suppose our ethos. Oh, yes, very good name that. We needed to build up up what we were about and how we were doing it, and of course our members. We also had members joining us, and the reason that they joined us is that they could see that what we wanted to do was to present a united front to the Minister of Justice and all the other things. That we are people who are working at the sharp end, helping to turn people away from criminality. And that is absolutely our raison d'etre. This is what we need to do. We need more people, and we need the public perception to change, because a lot of the people in the public think that if someone's been to prison, they're kind of almost subhuman. Whereas my thought is that if you've been to prison, you've done the time for your crime, the slate has got to be wiped clean. Robin used to say, prison isn't full of bad people. It's full of people who've done bad things. and most, not all, most need a chance to change. So uh, this is the message that we want to get out, and we're just going to start a campaign to try and change public perception by talking to your next door neighbor, your greengrocer, your MP, about the fact that people in prison need a second chance. Most of them do. If I had a fairy godmother wand, I would change the complete system. I would make specialist prisons. I would make a prison for people with addiction, with specialists there to help them to turn away from that addiction. And the same with trauma, and the same with mental health. And then I would have one for the people who need to be there forever, like Sarah Everard's killer and the taxied rapist and people like that, Jack the Ripper or whatever his name was. You know, people who need to be in prison forever. Because I know there are people who are bad. There are people who are evil, and they need to be punished. So that's fine. But uh, there was a custodial manager at the prison service who told me that if he had to induct 10 new people, they would all have suffered at some stage with childhood abuse, with mental health, with trauma. They would have tried to commit suicide. They would be unemployed. They'd have no skills, no education. So they were predicated almost from birth to be in prison. And we have to start there. We had Lord John, I do Zooms for my members with the leaders in the prison reform sector. And we had Lord John Bird, who was who started the big issue.
Mm.
Yeah.
And he kept on saying, why don't we catch them at the top of the cliff rather than wait for them to get to the bottom, because then it's too late. And prevention. It's my new mantra. We have to do more prevention. We have to do more training and talking and helping people before they start to get on the cliff, before they even get on the cliff. So there's a huge amount to do, and I'm very proud of the way that the Corbett Network has entered into the top of the prison reform sector, with of course many others and many more successful people. But I also need, I'm a one-man band. And I've also been self-funding. So from January, my members are going to be asked to pay £60 a year because I can't afford to self-fund anymore. And I need, of course, core funding as well, because I need to build this organization up even bigger. And we need staff and so on, and we haven't got the money for that yet. So core funding is, again, something that I'm interested in, but for some reason fundraising is not in my DNA. I'm not very good at it, so I'm asking people to do it for me. So I'm at the stage now where everything I see in the criminal justice system has got to be improved, but to improve it, it has to change. And the one thing I've learned about the British people is they don't like change. They like things the same way. It was like that. It was like that before, and it was fine before, and it's going to be fine now, and it's not, because people have changed and things have changed. And these big warehouses, I wouldn't mind building more prisons if they're going to start to close these old Victorian prisons, which are not fit for purpose now. Um, but they're not. They're going to use them as well. So we're going to increase the numbers of people, and they have predicated that there's going to be. I mean, we're now 86 or 88,000 people in prison. Well, it's going to be very, very much more than that by 2025. Which is saying, I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for you to do something wrong so I can send you to prison. It's that kind of attitude which I don't think. We need more rehabilitation. We need more prevention, and we need more empathy. I mean, some of these people, and the other thing, some of these people need help, not imprisonment. But there are so many things, great things happening by committed people inside prisons. I don't want you to think that they're all bad. They're not. They try very hard. Some prison officers, I've got a member called Unlock Graduates, and they ask graduates from universities to sign up to be a prison officer for 2 years, and they train them very, very over a long period. Normally, prison officers now are trained over 6 weeks. Um, when the Conservative government came in, they made 12,500 experienced, therefore expensive prison officers redundant. They've now got 2,500 back, so we're still 10,500 short. So it's not easy. I mean, I remember going to Rochester Prison once, and going into their workshop where they did what do you call this? I've just lost.
Woodwork,
No,
woodwork,
not wood, stonework, stonemasonry.
stonemasonry,
Oh,
stonemasonry.
and
Yeah.
and the quality. I mean, I was amazed, and they do it commercially. They were selling it, to homes and churches and so on. And there were 12 in the room, and of course there were two prison officers there because there were a lot of tools that were being used, and there were 60 people waiting on the waiting list to get into there. So that was something. The 60 people were trying to become wellmates, and one of them in the room said to me, I have a skill now. When I leave, I can become a stonemason. He said, but the weekends are so boring. He said, because the staff, we've got a skeleton staff, so we can't be in here. And therefore, weekends in prisons are dire because, they have to stay in their shells quite more than they normally do, and they don't have the facility for all the things that they should do. So there's so much wrong and so much right. This is the problem that I struggle with, because there is a lot of right coming on. So I would say that it's more grey, than black.
And you mentioned, I mean, a huge variety of parts of the criminal justice, including prevention. So there's a lot of work that police have done and still are on
Yeah,
adverse child experiences and the predictors of outcomes, and
yes,
as you rightly say, the central role of work on well-being
yeah.
in all of this. Do you plan, or do you get involved in the early years side of it with a view to reducing offending in the first place, like with schools or with families or socioeconomic kind of
Mm,
context that may predict or lead to
yes, yeah. I,
have
I,
you?
I don't, of course, but I've got members who go in and talk to children, and young children as well, not only teenagers, but they do go and talk to them. There are lots of my members who talk to at-risk offenders, people young kids who've done bad things, uh, who are not going to, who haven't been sent to prison, but are at risk of going to prison. Uh, so there is a lot of work going on, but there's not enough. And as I say, the whole prison system uh, doesn't seem to react favorably to changing. Um, the new head of prisons, whom we've also had to talk, excellent woman, absolutely excellent. But she was all keen on the new prisons because she said if they have a new prison, and they call them rooms, not cells. Well, there is a prison like that called Five Wells, and I'm afraid there's a huge drug problem there. So, so it's nothing to do with this, with the way the prison is, and the building and all the extra things that they're given. It's nothing to do with that. It's the type of person inside and how they're treated, and the regime. I'll tell you what. I go into. I've been into several prisons, and it's horrible. People who think that prisons are a holiday camp. I've never been near a prison. Trust me. Um, uh, and the thing I hate, there are two things I hated most. There were no knobs on the doors, so you have to wait for this officer with this huge ring of keys to come and unlock the door so that you can get it through. But the other thing that I would find very difficult Okay, you lose your freedom. I understand that, and that's bad. But the thing I think I would find worse than losing the freedom is the fact that you have a regime inside, that you know what you're doing every minute of the day. You have no control over saying, well, today, I just fancy sitting and reading. You can't do that. So the regime there is I think, very, very difficult for many people. Um, and I want to tell you a funny story. There was a film crew in the prison, and quite by chance, when somebody went to unlock the door, they got a photograph of the key, and all the prisons had to change that key, and it cost millions because people could have, made copies of it. So you have to be very careful when you're in prison, and it's not a pleasant place at all. Trust me.
Conscious of the time because we're 56 minutes in and we
Wow.
started a little bit late. So wanted to, I guess, ask in trying to bring to a close,
Mhm.
if there was anything else that you wanted to share before we draw stumps, and Rob, whether you had anything else you wanted to ask.
I've got one. So the network, um, it sounds really incredible that you've
Which which net-
convened these
which network?
stakeholders.
Which network?
Not the women's one, the
Oh, the other one.
criminal
Okay.
justice.
Okay.
The members
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
um, and and so what would success? What is that members? So I was on the board of a something called it's now is it called Tech UK? It was a lobbying group for the IT industry. It was a
Mm.
members organisation. All the big tech go to government and go, well, you know. So the self interest there is the members of the network in technology wanting
Yeah.
legislation that made it easier for them to make more money. Um, that's a very cynical view, but as a reformer, as someone passionate with how do we serve the people who are victims of the system better, what outcome would you, if you were dreaming, you know, what is the outcome that you'd like to pursue with your members in terms of criminal justice reform? How could you paint a picture for that?
Well, I painted a picture with the specialist prisons because I think that's the way forward. Um, but I think, uh, I mean, we spend 40, I think it's 44,000 per prisoner per year, on every prisoner per year. I mean, do the math, they're 86,000. Um, I mean, Eton actually costs less. So we'd save money if we sent them all to Eton. Um, the other thing is that reoffending rates cost £18 billion, £18 billion a year. Think what that money could do for the country if that was reduced. So I think my overall plan, my overall dream, I mean, I like Martin Luther King. I have a dream. I might not see it in my lifetime, but I see a far more humane system than we have at the moment. I see more empathy for people. I see more prison officers being paid decent jobs. The churn factor in prison officers is amazingly high because these young guys go in. It's not it's quite well paid actually at the moment, but the work is hard. The work is very tough, and you need a special type of person to do that. And the training hasn't been, I think, many people might think, not relevant enough for them to be able to cope. So they leave. So we've got a problem there. So we need more money spent on rehabilitation, more money spent on the training of prison officers, more money spent. So the money that we spend on reoffending can come down because if we do it right on rehabilitation and prevention, that money should come down. And then we could pay, and that money could go towards doing more expensive and training, long-term training for prison officers, which would make them more efficient, and more effective. There's an awful lot to do. And in my view, there's not a lot of time left because we're so sunk into the same old that it's difficult to get out of that. And so we need brains that think outside the box.
And
And
I'm so glad. Sorry to interrupt, but I asked that question because in drilling down, I think the piece of work that we've explored about the Ethos Commons Fund and what we might be looking is not about same old, same old. It is about finding change through new and innovative. And that this is why I kind of asked about the prevention and the upstream stuff and the top of the cliff, bottom of the cliff. To kind of look at, how do we actually look at the system and go, well, in a perfect world, we might be locking up some people, but not somebody for X number of years for stealing a mobile phone or
exactly.
whatever, who needs and deserves a second chance. And how might we look at keeping them out of prison in the first place? Because
Well,
we've done quite a bit of work with residential um, drug and alcohol rehab centres, for people without the privilege of money, so not rock stars, but the revolving door from prisons to rehab to community drugs to back is just the thing. I can't quote the statistics because I can't remember them, but they're shockingly high.
yeah.
They're just shockingly high, and so this sort of revolving door of if you get on a pathway, sometimes it's impossible to leave that pathway with all the will in the world from the individual. You're on a path, and that's it. You're kind of almost you can't get
Mm,
off it.
mm.
So,
Well,
so I
and
love I love the idea about a system where the demand is really small because we've done a good job of
exactly,
actually not creating
exactly.
the problem in the
Yeah,
first place.
yeah. And of course, the economic situation now makes for uh, very difficult times. I mean, in Tower Hamlets, which is a very um, poor area of London, the most shoplifted item is Calpol and baby milk. So um, I've got I'm a huge supporter of food banks, Trussell Trust, and I support them financially, but also in store. I always buy a few extra things and put it in the bin. And I couldn't find the bin in one supermarket. And I said, "Where is the bin?" He said, "We've had to hide it." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because people keep on taking things out." And it's people who need things and they haven't got the money to buy. So we are living in very perilous times,
Yeah.
and I do worry. I do worry a
Well,
lot.
and the fact that the Trussell Trust has boomed and ballooned is not a good thing.
Not at all. Not
And
at all.
and
And they
and it
want to close down. They'd love to close
mm,
down, and they obviously cannot.
yeah. So
It's
when you talk to community centres and people, so we're so busy now peddling just to keep our head above water that the
exactly,
idea that we might
exactly.
reform and create something new is just it's how do we get the capacity for that? And that's really where our
Mm.
conversation started. So I just want to thank you for such entertainment this now this afternoon
Well,
of a
I'm
substantive
sorry.
nature. I've
I mean,
loved it. I really have enjoyed
well,
it.
that's very good. But because, I know I talk a lot. A lot of my friends say you have to wait for her to breathe before you can get into it.
I haven't learned that, as you know from my interviewing technique today. I haven't learned that skill yet, so I've just let it roll. So it's fantastic.
No, thank you very much. Listen, thank you very much indeed for giving me this opportunity. Because the more I can talk about the reality of prison life, the reality of being in prison, and the immense amount of money that we taxpayers are having to fork out, in my view, unnecessarily. If there was change, we would have to fork out far less, and the money could be spent in a better way. So the more I can talk about it, the happier I am. So thank you so much for giving me this chance. I really,
It was
really
our pleasure.
appreciate it.
It was
No,
our pleasure.
You're
Well, until
most
until the next
welcome.
time,
Yeah.
Lady
okay.
Val,
Thank
thank you
you.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
I'll
Lovely
speak to
meeting
you
you
next
again.
time.
Bye bye.